This is the Conrad Alert. Civil defense information will be broadcast at 6:40.
West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello.
Y2K, how can we prepare?
Stop a few of their machines and radios. Throw them into darkness for a few hours.
We are fighting for our lives. My family must survive.
Over 5 years, 1,000 gallons of gas, air filtration, water filtration.
Coming at you from the frozen tundra that is East Central Alberta, Canada. Streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Rumble, and Odyssey. Welcome back to the workshop where we create community, find freedom, promote preparedness, and share success. I am Toolman Tim. Today is June the 8th, 2023. This is episode 322 of Workshop Radio. In just a moment, I have the world's foremost expert on attack rabbits, and he's pretty good at solar too, coming on, Mr. Shawn Mills. Real quick, we'll get the announcements out of the way, and then we'll bring him right on. So, Patch of the Month Club, guys. It has been building. I appreciate every single month we pick up new subscribers. I love it. I haven't unveiled this month's patch yet because not everybody's got it, but Erin from Two Chicks Homestead sent me a message yesterday saying how much she loved it. So if you're looking to support what I do and get a cool patch every single month, patchofthemonth.co, that's .co. I didn't leave the M off. That's on purpose. $10 a month, $100 a year, and you get a really cool, politically incorrect patch. And Shawn doesn't know it yet, but next month was inspired by him. Wasn't just inspired, he created it. So it's going to be a good one. Number 2, the Telegram group, guys. That's the place where, like I said, all the cool kids hang out. Really, it's the place where the workshop delinquents are. It's the place where we kick each other in the ass, give each other inspiration, and see an incredibly renovated, restored airplane tonight. I couldn't believe it. The work on that was just unbelievable. Rusty, you did great on that. You got to see it, guys. Come by, check it out. But that is where we hang out. That is where we share information. We inspire one another. And if you tell me, Tim, I don't need another social media, I don't know what to tell you. It's honestly really the big place where I'm at all the time. And it's the place where we all get to interact as a community. And with that, guys, let's slide on over. Let's bring in Mr. Shawn Mills. Oh, man. How are you, brother? Oh, hang on. I have you muted. That wasn't on purpose. I was just trying to be mean. So let's try this again. Yeah. Now he's muted. I knew it. Yeah, he was pretending not to be heard now. So how are you, brother?
I'm great, Tim. How are you doing, man?
Not bad at all. Last time I seen you, I believe we were sitting around the fire, smoking a cigar and drinking some bourbon.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. At the LFTN workshop.
Yes. Can't come soon enough, can it? Another sitting around a fire, drinking some bourbon and smoking some cigars. So
absolutely.
Right on. So tell us, I'm sure most know who you are, although lately there's been a couple who didn't know who you were. But tell us who you are, Shawn. Where'd you come from? We got a tradition here that we always love to hear what your first job in high school was.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, so the first job was washing dishes at the Waffle House. And I believe that you have recently been introduced to Waffle House culture as you has visited the South.
Oh, yeah. I do love me some Waffle House.
Yeah, my stepmom was actually a manager at the third ever Waffle House. And so, yeah, I got paid cash to wash dishes at 13. Became a server at 14, started cooking at 16, and actually had worked my way up to being an assistant manager at a Waffle House by 18 when I decided that I needed to go get a real job. But I still love Waffle House and eat them regularly.
Oh, yeah, I do too. I don't know what it is. I'm a sucker for diners, for starters, but there is just something about the whole Waffle House aesthetic and environment that, I don't know. Just don't look at the grill because, boy, it can be dirty someday.
That's right. That's right. Just make sure everything on the plate looks okay. But yeah, so after that, after my experiences with the Waffle House, I got into construction. I grew up kind of in the Atlanta area, and construction was booming. Went from commercial construction over into industrial construction, and I really spent about the last 20 years working primarily in the power generation space. So I've done work at nuclear power plants, coal, gas, hydro plants. I've done work at windmills. We actually were part of the team that developed the first tools to actually ride up the side of the windmills to go up and work on the nacelles, as well as solar concentrated. So you don't hear about that anymore, but back when you would go and you would see all of these mirrors that were aimed at a big tower, and the top of the tower looked like Mount Doom and Mordor, and it was literally molten salt in there. And they were using that. So worked on some of those projects out in Arizona and California. And that experience led me to kind of checking out how fragile our grid was. I understood how easy it was to trip a power plant and go from, a megawatt of production to nothing. And then I started finding out just how tough it was to maintain our national grid. And so I started thinking about getting into prepping a little bit. And after thinking about it a little bit, I decided to buy a property that was completely off the grid and, just jump in both feet. And we actually designed and installed a solar array and battery bank and inverters, charge controller, the whole 9 yards. And that led to kind of a side gig of helping other people design and install the same thing. So that's kind of the genesis of my story.
And you, if I remember, and I might be incorrect, I think, earlier you said 2,500, but you guys basically lived off of how many watts?
Yeah, about 2,500 watts of solar from starting in 2012. Well, let me rephrase that. In 2012, when we put the first system in, we just had batteries, an inverter, and a generator. So we would run the generator to charge the batteries up, and then we'd run off the batteries for a couple of days, and then we'd do it again. And then in February 2013, I was able to find a killer deal of solar panels for $1 a watt. And so I pulled the trigger and I bought 2,500 watts worth of solar and installed them. And that's what we lived off of. Now today, I would tell anyone that $1 a watt, they're getting their money stolen out of their wallet. But we just did a big solar group buy down in Tennessee. We bought 56,000 watts of solar panels at an average cost of about 25 cents a watt.
So in just over a decade, it's dropped 75% roughly.
Yeah. Now I did buy new panels when I did my install, and our group buy was used panels.
Okay.
But a watt is a watt. It doesn't matter whether it's a brand new or a used panel generating it. The only thing is that when we talk about those systems, we're talking about nameplate capacity, and most of the panels that we bought in the group buy were about 7 years old. So they were running at about 93% capacity versus brand new. That being said, every single one of them were tested, and a lot of them tested at their nameplate capacity. So even after 7 years, once they get a nice cleaning and the connections are replaced, they were still generating at their nameplate capacity.
So what happens to a solar panel? I mean, everything sure degrades over time, but what components or what causes the efficiency to decrease over time?
It's primarily degradation of the glass. So
Really?
Essentially you're shading the cells. That is the vast majority of the reduction in capacity you see on a solar panel comes from very, very small amounts of shading, because the glass itself is just obviously getting blasted with UV rays all the time.
Could you, me thinking outside the box, but could you go, how you can refurbish headlight lenses and that sort of thing? Would there be any benefit in polishing, or I guess you couldn't shave because it's glass, but trying to resurface it ever so slightly?
I don't think so. And the reason why I say that is a lot of my customers have huge arrays and, megawatt plus arrays. And commercially, no one is looking at refurbishing these, right? So now that being said, cleaning them off, giving them a good cleaning has actual measurable impact. But in terms of resurfacing, I haven't seen anything commercially viable, and typically that's the first hurdle. You got to get it to work at the megawatt scale before it can work at the home scale.
So I built a little solar system for my garage. So I just put an inline plug so I can unplug it, plug it into the power, and I can run it off that. And it works pretty good. So of course, we get this white stuff up here that falls from the sky sometimes.
Right.
So somebody had to, a little, kind of. So somebody said I should try Rain-X, that treatment for windshield. It didn't do much for me. Now, my solar panels are on a 45 degree because I don't know. Anyway, the research I did, it seemed like a good medium, kind of the good middle of the road angle, I guess. I could be wrong, but anyway, it didn't really seem to do much. Is there any benefit in treating solar panels like that at all?
Not really. They do a really good job in the manufacturing process of getting that glass just as smooth as possible. And there's been a lot of work put into that specifically for what you're talking about, for trying to get that snow to slough off. So they get generation in northern climates. I think everyone is kind of going to a panel that can heat itself a little bit. And so obviously part of that is going to depend on how much snow we're talking about. But if you're regularly sloughing snow off by melting it and then obviously having it run down, that's something that is there are panels out there that can do that.
I'm guessing that the little bit extra power that it would use would be offset by the fact that you're gaining a lot more power keeping them uncovered.
Yep. So essentially the idea is you have to have a power source to do that. And so typically that system's got to be tied to a battery bank. They'll pull power out of the battery bank, heat up the frames of the panels a little bit, let that snow come off. And then, of course, once the snow's off, now we're back into generating. And so you can actually program those systems to do it at the right time. Obviously, it doesn't help you a whole lot to melt the snow off at 3 a.m.
Sure. No, so I don't know if it would help me much at all up here at times. It gets down. Well, it's not. Well, yeah, minus 30, minus 40 for a couple of weeks at a time or longer.
Sure, but that's ambient temperature. And when you've got a black solar panel that's getting hit with direct radiant heat from the sun, it will be significantly hotter than ambient temperature.
That makes sense. And we're one of the highest amount of sunshine days in Canada as well here. So I should really run the numbers, but I still get a fairly good generation of power even in the wintertime here, which is kind of cool.
Right.
Because the sun is, you watch it here and it's like, just barely comes up.
So to give you some perspective, you're at 45 degrees. Typically when I do a system down where I live, I'm going in at 30 degrees. That's kind of my middle ground. And so you're angled a little bit more towards the horizon because the sun is riding closer to the horizon through a larger portion of the year, just because of the latitude that you're at. If you were closer, if you're at the equator, you might be at 9 degrees year round.
Because I suppose right over top of you at that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here's a question that I didn't send you. Lots of them. We'll do this all night. But so I remember, 2007, 2008. And, my entire life it's been, they'll come out with the cure for cancer, or they'll come out, whatever it happens to be. You'll hear a news story and it sounds really promising and then nothing comes of it. I remember hearing about printed solar panels when I was working in Saskatchewan. It was either 07 or 08. So we're talking 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. Did that ever happen, or was it just not feasible, or do you know much about it?
Technically you could print a solar panel right now.
Okay.
It's just not economical.
Okay.
Yeah, when in that time frame, you're talking about $1.50 a watt probably was the going rate, and so everyone was thinking about ideas. How do we make this cheaper? How do we make this cheaper? So you could actually get the components necessary to create a solar cell and print them now. That being said, you got to think about, okay, what are you printing it on? How are you assembling them? And, say what you want to say about China, but they have become so efficient in their manufacturing processes when they're doing things like a flat piece of something with no moving parts, right, that you just can't compete with that. But I always thought it would be neat to be able to print a solar cell, 3D print my battery, and then plug the two of them together. There was a thought process at one time that you'd be able to print a solar cell on a sheet of 8.5 or 8 by 11 sheet of paper and literally put it on your window, and hook it up to your battery. And while technically you can do that, it's not economic.
Fair enough. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So traditionally, back 2012 when you made Don move off grid with you, and that's his wife, by the way. Yeah. Almost talked her into moving into a bus, but anyway, no. But so when you guys first did that, what batteries did you get, and what was the technology? Kind of how have they changed since then too?
Yeah, so great question. The batteries we used were golf cart batteries. They were Trojan T105 6-cell batteries.
Okay.
So each battery had 3 2-volt cells. I think I said 6-cell, but I meant 6 volts. Each battery had 3 2-volt cells, and we wired those into a 24-volt inverter. So we had 8 total batteries. 4 were wired together in series to make 24 volts, and then 4 other ones were wired together in series to make 24 volts, and then those 2 sets were wired together in parallel to increase our storage capacity. Those cost me about $135 a piece at the time.
Okay.
I think that was actually with the core charge, if I recall correctly, because I didn't have 8 batteries to turn in when I went and bought my very first batteries. So they were $135 a piece. I got them at a golf cart store.
Okay.
And it probably cost me another $100 to buy the terminal connections and the wiring to wire everything together. That's actually, so I don't have a 401k. I just have all my old battery cables stored in the corner of the shed. That's probably $250 realistically worth of copper and wire today. And the last time I price checked those batteries, they're about $185 plus the core charge.
So were they flooded lead acid? Were they? Or
yeah, sorry about that. Yeah.
That's okay.
They were flooded lead acid batteries. They were specifically designed for deep cycle. Okay, so as a matter of fact, at that time, Trojan was putting out a renewable energy style. It was the same Trojan T105 battery, but it had slightly different plates on the inside. So all flooded lead acid technology, and those batteries came with a 5-year warranty, which is a big deal for those batteries back then. And Trojan also made a 2-cell battery. So the one battery itself was like 135 pounds. And so to get a 24-volt system, we would have had to buy 12 of those. But yeah, all flooded lead acid technology. And I did the math and did all the research. There wasn't anything that was more cost effective at that time. $1,300 plus $100 in connection materials, $1,400. I had a battery bank, and like I said, we started off with that, a $2,500 inverter, and a generator.
Yes, sir. So let's fast forward ahead 11 years later. You're now getting ready to build a new system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or soon. What are you going to use now?
So now we're going to go with a lithium iron phosphate battery. Around 2019, lithium iron phosphate became the most cost effective on a per cycle basis. So there was a while there where, even though they lasted so much longer than a flooded lead acid battery, they were still so much more expensive that it just didn't make the economics did not work.
Sure.
And I would test that every year, because they're a lot lighter, they're easier to deal with, and they last, 10, 15, 20 years, maybe, if you treat them right.
Wow.
Versus if we really, really baby a flooded lead acid battery, we're going to get about 7 years out of it. Most off-grid systems are getting 3 to 5 years out of a flooded lead acid battery bank. And so for a long time, it was still cheaper to just replace your battery bank every 5 years with flooded lead acid.
Right.
2019, it switched. And then in 2019, the lithium iron phosphate battery tech had come down to the point where it was finally about the same from a cost per cycle standpoint. But because you didn't have to have any maintenance, they were more efficiently charged and discharged.
Right.
flooded lead acid. So you could technically get by with less solar panels and have actually more generation because you weren't losing some of that efficiency, converting it to battery storage. And so 2019, it made a lot of sense. 2020, 2021, and across 2020 and 2021, the cost of flooded lead acid kept climbing and the cost of lithium iron phosphate kept dropping. And now it's not even close. So on a per cycle basis, lithium iron phosphate is about a third of the cost of a flooded lead acid system of the same size.
And they weigh, so how much less in the same cubic, like are they half as heavy or 2/3 lighter?
So the Trojan, to put this in perspective, the 8 Trojan T105 batteries that I had that each weighed about 90 pounds
Yep.
are being replaced with one flooded lead acid battery that weighs about 90 pounds.
So you're talking about an eighth of the weight then.
Yep.
And also, I'm not an expert, but if I remember correctly, can't you okay, no, I'll let you fill me in. So the difference between flooded lead acid and lithium iron phosphate, is that right?
Yes, sir.
What is the what is the discharge rate for each of them that is safe for the battery?
So typically on a flooded lead acid, you don't want to go any further than about 50% depth of discharge. So 50% depth of discharge is going to get you that 5-year life. A lot of people will go with a more shallow discharge rate. They'll try to stay where they're not taking any more than about 25% of the available energy out of the battery bank. And if they do that, then they can get out to about 7 years. And so to put that in perspective, and by the way, if you're going, if you go to 80% depth of discharge, so you're taking 80% of the usable energy out, you're talking about 18 months and you're replacing that battery. It just won't, you're building up so much sulfation on those plates inside the battery, you can't burn it off fast enough. It builds up faster than you can burn it off. And so, and I mentioned earlier, kind of in passing, the maintenance side, right? So we got 7 years out of our batteries by babying them and by equalizing them every single month, and sometimes more than once a month. And so equalizing is we're essentially burning all of the buildup off of the plates so that every cell in the entire battery bank gets charged to the same voltage. Okay. Because if I have a cell that's got some sulfation buildup on it, and I can only get that cell to, let's say, 2 volts, then that means that I can't, what's going to happen is my charger is going to read the internal resistance in that battery. And when it gets to 2 volts, it's going to say, okay, we're done. We don't need to put any more power in the battery. And so now I've got a battery bank, the whole battery bank, that I can't charge up all the way. And again, with lead acid batteries, you lose capacity by not getting them back up to 100%. So a cycle for flooded lead acid is I'm discharging it and I'm bringing it all the way back up to 100%. And if I don't do that, I'll damage the battery over the long term. Whereas a lithium iron phosphate battery, I don't have to do that. I don't have to get it back up to 100% every day. I can discharge that thing. We typically try to tell people design around an 80% depth of discharge, but those batteries will go below 90% depth of discharge with minimal problems. Now, are you going to get 16, 17 years if you're regularly going down below 90%? No, you're not. But it's not going to damage the battery to do that here and there when you need to. Whereas with a flooded lead acid battery, you take 90% of the energy out, you might as well set it on fire when you're done with
it. Because it's hooped.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. So I'm going to go off on a tangent here for a minute. I want to ask you about this and then we'll come back. But did you watch, the zombie show, The Last of Us? Did you happen to watch that?
Yes.
Okay. So episode 3, I think, with Prepper, Nick Offerman is the underground prepper dude.
Uh-huh.
Did you catch at the end? He had a battery that he had stored in the fridge, and he had, I think, the plates. It was either a dry battery and he had the acid next to it, or is that, I've been wanting to ask you this and I forgot to ask at LFTN. Is that even practical, or is there any way to store a battery like that for 15 years and then use it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because what you're doing there, so the chemistry in that battery works once the components are assembled.
Okay.
So if you've got your plates and you've got your anode and your cathode, you've got your electrolyte and you've got your battery box.
Yep.
If you just have all of those components and you don't assemble them for 15 years, when you assemble them, it'll be just like a brand new battery. Okay.
Okay.
Now, if you assemble all of those components and you charge your battery and you put it up on the shelf, it's going to self-discharge over time. And that self-discharge will begin to get to the place where you're starting to, you'll lose the life of the battery. And so the way that they actually did a good job with that, if you were going to store a battery for X amount of time and be able to take it out, charge it up, and go use it, that's what you would want to do. You would want to disassemble or never even assemble the parts to begin with. And then once you assembled them, there's no corrosion, there's no issues that would have built up over that storage period.
Is it still possible to order dry batteries like that?
That I don't know.
That's what I was wondering. I wasn't sure. I know when I worked at the farm store, it was getting harder and harder to get them because they just a lot of them came sealed. They weren't even serviceable anymore.
Right.
But okay, that's cool. I mean, there's always ways to. What about, you ever see any of the videos of the guys refurbishing them with what do they use? Epsom salts maybe, or something along those lines?
I have. There is actually some credence to being able to refurbish flooded lead acid batteries with very specific charge cycles.
Okay.
So you're kind of like pulsing, you're like high voltage pulsing energy through the battery. Yeah. And essentially what you're doing there. So again, if we think about how a battery works,
sure.
You've got an anode and a cathode. Okay. And so the way that a battery works is that you're introducing current to the battery and it's creating a chemical reaction inside the battery. And what's happening is that as charge builds up, let's just say you move forward in the chemical reaction. Yep. And then when you're discharging, you move backwards in the reaction. Okay. And so every time you move forward and you move backwards, a little bit of and you've heard of people say there's sulfuric acid in the battery, right?
Yeah.
So a little bit of the components within that electrolyte get deposited on the individual plates of the battery. Okay. Sure. And then when you are equalizing the battery, you're literally burning that stuff off. Okay. But you can never burn it all off. That's why batteries don't last forever. And so you're putting it on, you're taking it off. That reaction, that chemical reaction inside the flooded lead acid battery is what actually stores the energy and then discharges it, right? And allows you to use it within the circuit. And so, the reason that batteries go bad is they get too much of that sulfation built up. And that process, so if we think about it from the standpoint of, let's say I've got a poster board, okay, and the poster board is completely clean. And then I've got enough stickers to cover all the poster board. And if we think about the stickers as in a lithium iron phosphate battery, those would be lithium ions, okay? So I put the stickers on, and every time I put all the stickers on and cover the battery or the poster board up, I'm 100% charged.
Right.
And then as I need to use the energy, I'm taking the stickers off. Okay. But I can never get all the stickers off.
Sure.
Right. Let's say I get 90% of the stickers off. Well, every time I do that, if I'm leaving 10% of the stickers on there that I took off, I have less stickers every time. Right.
Right.
And so that's kind of the idea of how the plates within those batteries get that sulfate buildup on them. And now there's less places for that chemical reaction to bond or unbond to allow the energy to come out. Now, sometimes it'll happen is that when you're equalizing the batteries, that stuff will fall off. It'll kind of, a little bit of the lead will flake off and go into the bottom of the battery. And if that builds up enough to short circuit, well, now you've just short circuited and you killed your battery. Okay.
Okay.
So if I'm trying to rehab one of those batteries, what I'm trying to do there is put an electrolyte in the battery that will help get that sulfation buildup off, the sulfide crystals off the lead plates.
Yep.
And do it in a way that doesn't short circuit the battery. So theoretically, any flooded lead acid battery can be rehabbed. Now, how much of that stuff you can get off, that's a different question. But there's a lot of guys out there kind of going and finding these beat up batteries, putting that specific electrolyte in there, and then that pulsing charge at a higher voltage than what you would normally put in the battery, but over like 1 second or less than 1 second is what kind of blasts that stuff off the plates of the battery, and that's how they're rehabbing them.
Okay. Project Farm did something with a welder, I believe.
Oh,
used
really?
some, I think, some high voltage for short periods of time or something.
Okay.
And I think he had pretty good success. So I'll
Right.
I'll look into it some more. But I'm always a big fan of the fun, the mental games of, well, what would happen if, shit hits the fan scenario and there's no new batteries being made, right? So yeah, I don't know. It would be cool. I'm going to tinker with that a little bit.
Yeah.
Haas has a question for you. Said, I see those Harbor Freight solar kits on sale with a coupon. Are they any good?
I would not buy them, but I will say that there are certain applications where that's perfectly fine. Okay, so the Harbor Freight kits typically are just a panel, a charge controller, and a small inverter. Okay.
Right.
And so it's not an inverter charger, meaning you can't plug AC power into it and have that charge up the battery. And again, it doesn't come with a battery. So if you're using some sort of solar direct type system, or you've got like an old 12-volt battery and you just want to say, hey, I'm going to go buy this system that's on sale, assemble the components so I can see how it works. And I think it's a great way to cheaply learn about how the different components of a standard solar system work, but it's not going to do a ton of work for you. It might keep some batteries, some DeWalt batteries charged up, or cell phone batteries, or, batteries, anchors, that you can plug in and use for other things. But I wouldn't buy one of those and say, well, when the storms come through and the power goes down, I'm going to be able to keep my refrigerator cold with it. I
bought a 200-watt eco-worthy system off of Amazon, and it, I bought 4 Group 27 deep cycle batteries at the time from my local farm store, build an insulated kit, and then I bought but of course it's all piecemeal, right? So then I bought a 1,500-watt pure sine wave inverter to run off the other side, and then I bought $4,000 worth of copper connections to hook them all together, and hooked them all up until they stopped sparking, so I knew I was good.
Yeah. That's
had them all going the right way. Yep. Yeah. And it's been good. Like I 100% of all my DeWalt batteries get charged off it. All my LED lighting can run off it. I can even run my furnace off it in there for a while. I haven't tested to see if I could drain it. I'm sure I could, but in a pinch, I bet you I could run my furnace for a day in there, because it's just a blower motor. And it's
I was going to say, are you heating with gas, and then you've got an electric igniter and an electric blower?
Yep. So it's a natural gas ceiling mounted furnace. And yeah, it doesn't take a ton of power at all. I think 700 watts if I have everything running, something like that. So it's not horrible. But it's been good. I've learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes, and I'd love to build a bigger system someday.
I know a guy who can help you with that.
I do too. I got to get him up here sometime. So. All right. So, okay. I do a thing called Stranger Than Fiction, where I share news stories and we just talk about them on the podcast. And so I'm about every day I go through Google News or, whatever, try to find stuff. And it does not seem to be a week goes by that they don't announce a new type of technology of battery. It's almost like the latest breakthrough in battery technology that's going to save the earth from whatever, that kind of thing. Right.
Oh, yeah.
So I made a list of a few, but before we dive in, are there any that you've got your eye on that you might think, I don't know, where do you think the future's heading first? Put your kind of, crystal ball.
So really there's kind of 3 answers to that question, because there's so many different use cases for batteries, right? So the one that you hear about in the news a lot is we've got all of this solar production, we've got all this wind production or capacity to install more. And the problem is that when we're generating and when we want to use the power are two different times of the day. Okay.
Right.
And so there's, if your listeners want to look up something called the duck curve, what that is an overlay of solar generation with typical usage in the U.S. And it shows kind of the difference between when we're generating versus when we need it. So there's a utility scale, use case. And I think I think that's going to be solved with things like gravity batteries or things like the iron air batteries. Those are technologies that don't require chemistry to work. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
There's a lot of places in the southeastern U.S. where we have tons of water, where we'll pump water up to the top of a mountain that we've drilled a hole through, and we've got basically like a turbine at the bottom of the mountain. And so when we've got extra production during the day from solar panels, we'll pump water up to the top of the mountain. And then when everyone gets home from work and starts cooking dinner and turning their ACs up and all those things, they release the water that turns the hydro turbine at the bottom and creates the electricity that they can now put on the grid. So it's a grid leveling technology. I think the last time I looked at the one that's near Chattanooga, Tennessee, it generated -8 gigawatts of electricity. So we used 8 gigawatts more electricity than what it actually generated. But that allowed the grid to take excess solar energy when it wasn't needed and store it and then use it when it was needed. Okay. And the only other option would be what's called curtailment. So curtailment is when your solar field is trying to generate electricity and you don't have anywhere for it to go. So you just don't let it generate. Okay. You keep the circuit open and don't use it. And so while -8 gigawatts is kind of crazy when you think about it, what that meant is that we were able to take renewables, put them on the grid, and utilize that power when it was needed versus when it was generated. Now, I think that pumped water storage is probably not the way of the future because we don't have mountains everywhere with rivers at the bottom of them that we can discharge the water from, right? But the iron air battery is an interesting idea. So the iron air battery uses the oxidation of iron to store the energy. And so it rusts. Let me rephrase that. That's right. It rusts iron to store and derusts the iron or deoxidizes the iron or redux, if you've heard of that, to actually pull the energy back out. And I'm not 100% certain how that chemistry actually works. They're building the very first utility scale one in West Virginia right now.
Okay.
So once it's up and running, we'll find out if it's real. So that's an interesting one. The other one is, so there's another one, I can't remember what they call it, but it's essentially a big flywheel in a vacuum.
Okay.
And you can put thousands of these in and gear them together. And so you spin the flywheel in the vacuum. There's no friction. And so theoretically, it could spin just about forever. The only thing that would slow it down is gravity and the rotation of the earth. And so you spin them and get them going high RPMs when you have excess energy. And then when you have excess demand, you take those spinning flywheels and you start spinning up a turbine to generate electricity.
Is that how those early electric buses ran was it the 20s? Maybe you haven't looked into them, but
no, I haven't.
I want to say it was the 20s or 30s. They were charged up with a big flywheel, and then they could drive around town running off that flywheel. They just had to make sure they got back before they ran out of power. And there's pictures of them with these great big, circular things in the center of the bus. They were, I think it's almost 100 years old. That's what made me think of it.
Interesting. No, I haven't seen that, but yeah, same idea.
I'll see if I can find you a link and send it.
Oh yeah.
So
for sure.
I've been
You
Oh,
sent
go
me
ahead.
the one on the gravity battery, right? So
Yes.
this is a 400-foot tall structure with, I think, 35-ton weights essentially in it. And these weights can be made of anything. So you can literally take garbage out of the landfill and fill them up, right? Use components that don't really cost anything, and you lift them up into the top of this structure when you have excess generation, and then when you have excess demand, they're lowered and they're on a pulley system, and that pulley system turns a turbine to create energy. So I think those are the kind of ideas that you're going to see at utility scale. I don't think you're going to see 50 gigawatts or terawatts of lithium iron phosphate batteries get installed. I think you're going to see that those are going to be reserved for the EV market and for the home storage, the behind the meter storage market. And you'll see non-chemistry related solutions that are going to be put in at utility scale. That's what I think.
Because they don't have to use any natural resources or I mean, you don't say sand and gravel, maybe not sand, but gravel is almost an infinite resource. So you could take great big 35-ton, tote bags, fill them full of gravel, or like you said, even better, really win some points to the environmentalists and fill them full of, post-consumer waste, right?
Yep.
I think, I don't know, I bet you it was 10 years ago I heard Stephen Harris talk about those gravity batteries.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been intrigued. And then I saw so they're building one in Texas and they're building one in China.
That's right.
And it seems
the
like
Texas one's taller, because everything's bigger and all that.
Absolutely. Well, you know how it is, right? But to me, it seems like it seems like the perfect marriage of massive capacity for storage and almost zero environmental impact.
Right.
Because are we blowing it out of proportion, or is lithium really an environmental hazard like they talk about?
Well, I guess you'd have to define environmental hazard, right? So we mine all kinds of things. No one's mad about us building a building out of steel, even though iron ore is where that steel started its life. Now that being said, the problem with the idea that lithium is going to be the primary driver of storage for the quote unquote green revolution for the world is that there's not enough lithium. Okay. So I think sodium batteries is a thing, could be a thing that you start seeing the type of chemistry that works with a lithium iron phosphate battery. You can use other materials to do that. And I think that you're going to start seeing that. You're already seeing everyone really try to go away from nickel and cobalt. Just because specifically cobalt, there's some pretty horrible conditions in which that stuff is mined. That's more of a humanitarian thing than it is anything else. But I think that, lithium, there are some ways to get lithium without mining it, right? So there are some ways that you can do things like extracting heavy metal laden water, okay, taking the lithium out, and now you've actually cleaned the water, right? And so there's some things like that. I think sodium obviously is a much more abundant resource in the Earth's crust, and it's got similar. So if you think about the way that, and I think you sent me the question, I'll go ahead and answer it now. So the difference between the lithium ion battery and a lithium iron phosphate battery, right? So a lithium iron phosphate battery is a lithium ion battery. Lithium is just what happens to be what the ions are in that specific battery chemistry. Okay. So you've got a battery, there's an anode and a cathode. When you apply a charge from the outside, so you're now charging the battery up, okay? Yep. On one side of the battery, you have your lithium iron phosphate. On the other side of the battery, you have a graphite scaffolding, so to speak, okay? And what happens when the charge comes in is that you create, you basically break off positively charged lithium ions, and they move through the electrolyte into and become embedded in the graphite scaffolding structure. Okay. So for every 6 atoms of graphite, you have 1 atom of lithium. It kind of gets stuck in there. It's a hexagonal mesh, so to speak. Okay. So you've got negatively charged ions, right? I'm sorry, negatively charged electrons and positively charged ions, and they move through the circuit in opposite directions and meet at the graphite mesh. Okay. And so what you end up with when your battery is fully charged, all of the lithium is actually over here, and you just have a iron phosphate cathode on the other side of the battery. When you discharge the battery, everything happens in reverse. Now you have a negatively charged electron moving out of the battery through the circuit and back in on the other side, and it meets up at the cathode with the positively charged ion of lithium that moves across. And then so you have a half reaction that happens on one side of the battery, and then it moves through the battery and through the circuit, and it meets up on the other side of the battery, and the other half of the reaction happens. And so when the battery is fully discharged, now you're back to having all of your lithium over here. Okay. And so the reason why lithium works really well for that is it's one of the alkaline metals. Okay. And so it's just, your softer metals do that I can't remember what they call the process, but the process of ionization and moving and back and forth and being able to do that a lot of different times. Well, right after, if you look at the periodic table, right after lithium, you've got sodium. And so it's got very similar product. It's another alkaline metal. And so it's got similar properties. And so I think that your home storage systems could move in the direction of sodium ion batteries. Okay. The other nice thing about sodium is it's close enough to lithium where the existing manufacturing infrastructure can be used. Okay. And so that's, obviously any new technology that comes out today, lithium has a 25-year head start on it. Okay. And so the idea that you could use an element that's similar enough to where you can use the same processing techniques and the same manufacturing techniques to put the product out makes it a lot more commercially viable. On the EV side, I think what you're going to find is solid state batteries is where you're going to end up going. And so the only difference between a solid state battery and the batteries that we have now is that now we have a electrolyte that is liquid. Okay. And when you overheat that liquid because you're pulling too much out or putting too much energy in at one time, when you start cooking it, remember when I mentioned earlier that you get sulfation built up on the lead plates in a flooded lead acid battery? The same kind of thing happens in a lithium ion battery. You'll have the metal, the lithium will actually start attaching to the graphite and metallizing it. And now you can't use that site anymore. Okay. So imagine like a fish net and you're plugging up the holes. Okay? And so a solid state battery uses a electrolyte that is solid. It's like a ceramic. Okay. And so you don't have that problem. You don't have the thermal runaway problem. You could knock those batteries, apart, and they're going to be a lot safer. And so all of those things are things that the EV industry would value. You can actually charge and discharge those a lot more. So there's more cycles that you can get out. So if you could get to a place where you were making really commercially viable solid state lithium ion batteries, you could see a place where your car doesn't run anymore. So you take the battery out and you put it in your new car.
Right.
Okay. So I think those are the places, different solutions for different problems, but those are the, 3 or 4 kind of technologies that I really see the industry moving towards going forward.
So, okay. So many questions I want to ask, but the first one I got to ask is, okay, this is another thing that I have wondered for many years. and maybe there's just a stupid reason or it's simple, but okay, I have a DeWalt impact driver. The battery dies. I don't want to sit around and wait for it to recharge. I pop one out, I pop a new one in. Thought about this for years. Is there a reason why they didn't go modular for electric vehicles? Or is it just so heavy and expensive? And yes.
Yeah. So the and of course, I'm not Elon Musk, but I'll take a little bit of his money if he'd like to pass it my way.
Yes.
But I believe that the idea there wasn't enough infrastructure available to change batteries. And so the idea was we need to make, since this is the first one, right? Or the first one that's kind of made to really be a full-time EV that you drive every day, not the toys that we saw in the 90s. I think the idea was, hey, we need to make this to where once it's built, it's done, and you don't have to do anything to it but charge it back up. Now, I will say, I think NIO, if I recall correctly, which is a Chinese battery company that's specifically, for the EV industry. I believe that is their actual business model, is modular batteries and stations that you can pull in and just have your battery swapped out. And I believe that Tesla even looked at that at one point. I believe they actually looked at it and just said, there's not enough demand. There's not enough of these cars on the road for it to make sense. But China and NIO got together and said, hey, we're just going to start putting these in. It's kind of like solar panels. They just started making solar panels, and they just kept making them until we started buying them. Fair.
I get it. And I guess talking about it with you, I mean, you look at how small of a footprint a Tesla supercharger has or whatever, you go by, like they put a whole raft of them in Lloydminster about an hour from here. There's probably 10 or 12 and each one takes up basically a parking spot, Mm-hmm. It's literally at the head of a parking spot anyway. So it's already there, other than the big, whatever transformer or whatever it is that's sitting next to it. But that is a lot less. And you're tapping into an existing infrastructure too. So it's not like you got to all of a sudden have battery storage, and then you have a whole nother issue of like some are going to sit longer than others. I can see that makes sense.
So let's say there's 10 chargers there, right? So you can get 10 people that pull up and charge and drive away, and then 10 more people can pull up and charge and drive away. And theoretically, every hour you can have a new group of 10 folks show up, right? So imagine if you've got 8,000-pound batteries and you've got to store enough for some theoretical number of people that might show up, and you've got to keep those charged. And then you've also got to have the infrastructure to take the other ones out, store those, and get those recharged. And, now that we've taken them out, we've got to recharge them. And so, you're talking about that as 10 parking spots. Yeah, the transformer or two that's behind them there, versus, something that would look like a pretty decent sized warehouse, I would think. And you still have to do all of that electrical work to be able to charge the batteries up, whether you're just plugging the car in or you're plugging the battery in the warehouse.
It's a good point. I think you finally solved that mystery for me. So that's good. Sometimes just talking it out loud makes sense,
Yeah, and I'll say follow what NIO's doing. I'm almost certain that's the name of it in their NIO.
Okay.
And follow what they're doing, because I think if they can prove that they can make it work in China, I think you might start seeing people play around with that idea over here.
I'd love to see it, especially if batteries continue to get lighter, mm-hmm. and and more compact. If they can come up with, that would be neat, actually. So we got a few questions from the audience, but I want to ask you one more first. So you're talking about, I guess no matter what we want to do about it, I'm pretty sure we're heading toward a mostly all electric future, at least in the short term, or a massive amount of that. And you're pretty up on the grid. And of course, another common talking point in our community is that the grid will never support it. Is that true? Is that false? Will big business prevail? What are your kind of insights into that?
So there are two things that'll make this work, in my opinion. One of them is some really, really cool algorithms that can predict generation into the future and combine that with predictive analysis of what people's driving habits look like. Okay. I think that you'll have things that look like parking garages with solar panels all over them, and people can go park their car while they're at work and plug their car in.
Sure.
And the interaction of the grid and the car and the person's house, where there's another charger, will kind of do some calculations on, we can put this much into the car while it's parked here during the day, and then that car is going to use this amount to go home, and we're going to predict that over the next 4 days we're going to generate X amount of generation, and we're going to have X amount of usage. And so in the event that we have a unusually hot day and a lot more air conditioners come on, well, now maybe we're actually pulling power out of the cars,
right,
and using it to cover that. And so I think that'll be one big thing is, do I like the idea of some large entity having that much data about how much I'm driving and where I'm parking and what I'm doing at the house? Not necessarily, but I think that's going to be part of making the whole idea of carbon neutral whatever work. And the other thing is you're going to see a lot more microgrid style development. So you might have a subdivision get built, and every house in the subdivision has solar panels, and every house has a battery bank, and everyone drives another battery bank in the form of an electric vehicle. And maybe there's even a small natural gas generator that's in the middle of the neighborhood. And so what you'll have is you'll still have large centralized power plants that cover if you're looking at the load stack, they'll cover like the bottom 30%, the 30% that never goes away. Those will still be covered by your big on all the time, power plants. And then the other 70% will kind of be a symphony, so to speak, of generation from a lot of different sources, storage in a lot of different ways. And I think that's the only way that actually happens. And that's why I also say that the whole lithium everything, it just won't work. We need these, gravity or flywheel based generation or storage solutions to be able to maybe take that next 30% stack of the demand. Right. And so now we're only talking about having to cover the 40%, and that 40% can be covered by local generation. It can be covered. And so you talk about changing your battery out in your car, right? Changing your, 20,000 watt hour battery. Well, that could be another thing. Okay. Well, now I've got a utility scale warehouse in the middle of a town, or multiple, that's got all of these massive batteries in there. And I know how often people come in to change their battery, and I know about how many people I can expect to come in every day. And so all of the right on time storage that I have in that warehouse can also be used to charge up, charge down, supplement generation in the times when the sun's not shining or the wind's not blowing.
Can see that. Now I'm thinking out loud, but one thing I was thinking, of course, is, again, I love going to the past, but it's kind of a reflection of how power was built up originally, because people would come to town, somebody who knew how to do power, and they'd be like, hey, here's a water turbine or whatever. And they would basically get the town on the grid, and every little community had their own power grid to start with, and, kind of built from there. But I'm also seeing maybe, now, I don't love them, but HOAs or something. So you could be in a group community where part of your fees for living there are the electricity that's generated. So it's just a shared pool of electric. I don't love that. I'm just saying out loud, that's what I probably might see happen at some point.
People like you and I aren't going to love that, but there's a lot of people who would think that's a fantastic idea.
Yes. So here, now that you're talking about modular, you were thinking on a larger scale. I was thinking on an individual scale. So say you buy a vehicle, and you know how DeWalt has hey, buy this new drill, we'll throw in 2 batteries with it, right? So maybe Tesla or somebody else says, hey, we now have modular batteries. Buy your vehicle, get 2 batteries for free that plug into your Tesla Powerwall or something like it, and then it's stored energy. It would be a way of keeping gasoline on hand, that sort of thing, you know?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yeah. So the interesting thing there would be for mass adoption, you would need all of the different car manufacturers to kind of standardize on, okay, this is the battery pack that we're going to have in all of these vehicles.
What we'll get will be
battery. You have one car company get so big that it just buys the rest of them, and then they become the standard.
We'll probably get 2 for about 10 years, and eventually one, Blu-ray, HD, DVD, beta, VHS, that sort of thing.
All stores will be Costco.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Anybody get that reference? Because we're all in trouble if that's the case.
Welcome to Costco. I love you.
Yes, I love you. All right, so let's get back to some community questions here. So Haas, where was this one here? Said, is it possible to make a DIY off-grid solar recharge system for electric vehicles such as a Tesla?
Yes.
Okay, next question.
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, you can tell your Tesla how quickly to charge itself, what amperage to draw. And so essentially you just match up. So essentially what you're looking at there is you'd have your solar panels, you'd have your charge controller or your all-in-one inverter charge controller. And during the day you would charge your home batteries up. And then in the evenings or whenever you decided you wanted to plug your Tesla in and charge it, you would essentially just make sure that whatever the Tesla was going to be drawing from the battery bank, which again, you can program that on a 1 amp basis, like I want to do it at 27 instead of 28 today. So you program that and it would pull energy through your inverter from your batteries directly to the car. If you have the right kind of inverter, you could actually go, from solar panels through the inverter to the car. You're still going to have batteries. I don't think that you'd be able to modulate, because again, if you've got just solar panels and no batteries, what are you going to do if a cloud, comes across or whatever the case may be? So you still have to have kind of like a buffer there, but you can absolutely do a DIY system and charge an electric vehicle off of it.
So I don't know the math behind it, but can you do some quick back of the napkin math to how many panels you would need to, so because I've heard you talk before, if you want to build, whenever you build a system, you just build the capacity for whatever items you want, right? So say you want to up the capacity to add a Tesla. How many more panels would that take?
Well, it depends on how much you drive. I don't know what the range is. If someone wants to look up how many watts per mile a Tesla uses and maybe post it in the chat, I could, with that data point, I could approximate some sort of solution.
34 kilowatt hours for 100 miles.
Okay, 3,400 kilowatt hours. 3,400 kilowatt hours?
Nope, 34 kilowatt hour. 34, yeah. So 34 kilowatt hours of electricity per 100 miles.
Okay.
That's 34,000 watts, right?
Yeah. So times 1 hour. So to generate 34,000 watts in a day, an average day in we'll use a place that I'm familiar with, Tennessee. You would need about 9,000 watts of solar. And so that's 2,450 watt solar panels.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, it's not, it's not small or inconsequential, but it's not, an entire field full.
Yeah. That'd give you 100 miles a day
okay.
of generation, essentially.
So 20 panels. What are the dimensions? Are they 2x4 or are they bigger than that?
No. Those are going to be closer to 3.5 by 7.
3.5. So we'll call them 20. Call them 20 square feet, just for whatever. And how many did we say we needed?
20.
20. So 4,000 square feet. Is that right, or 400? 20. Yeah.
400.
400 square feet. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
So a 20 by 20 carport would do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you had a lean-to that was 20 by 20. And you covered the entire thing with solar panels, and you parked your car under there, and you had a battery bank in there, in theory, should be pretty close.
Yep.
We did all that live.
If you actually did that, as long as you called your carport a solar ground mount, it would be eligible for the 30% tax credit.
See, that was worth the price of admission alone, right there, guys. Nate's got one for us. Do you have an RFI quiet solar charge controller? I'm having an issue with the one I have, creating interference on some of the. I'm glad he said amateur radio bands. That way I don't have to drink. Whenever he says ham, we have to drink around here. So amateur radio bands when my radio is hooked up to our solar.
I don't. I haven't had that question before, so I haven't researched that.
Okay. We can maybe, if you happen to come across.
They all have transformers, so I'm not sure if you're ever going to get one that's not going to have any sort of interference. That's honestly the best answer I can give you on that one right now.
Have you seen a lot of the electric vehicle companies are trying to eliminate AM radio from their vehicles?
Really?
Their going story is that it causes interference with the electronics, but it's a cost saving measure because some of them do too, right? But a few of them do, but most of them are doing away with it now, including the new Ford Lightning, is it, or the F-150 Lightning?
Oh yeah, F-150 Lightning,
yeah. And I mean, I'm nostalgic for AM radio, but it's not a thriving enterprise anymore.
There's not a ton of content coming through the AM waves these days.
Not a lot. It's kind of going the way of shortwave, but it is what it is. But so what else? Oh yeah, did you ever see? I meant to ask you about those nuclear diamond batteries. I sent you something about those. Had you heard of those at all?
Yeah, I had heard of those. I think someone from the community sent those to me a couple of years ago.
Yeah, me too. I think it was PA Prepper. I think I might be wrong.
Oh yeah, it could have been. Yep. Yeah. And so, there's a whole lot of theoretical. So the problem with a nuclear diamond battery is this could be a feature, but I call it a problem. It's only going to output that certain amount, right? Now it'll do it for like 1,000 years, right? But you've got to design an electronic around it that is only ever going to need that. It can never put out any more, and it won't ever put out any less until, whatever radioactive decay 1,000 years from now. So if you've got, I think one of the things they talked about was like a pacemaker, or even like things for space exploration, like satellites and stuff like that. That's where the use case is, because you know exactly what the draw is going to be. It's never going to be any more. It's never going to be any less. And so you can take that information and combine it with the nuclear diamond battery to power your thing. The other thing is, if you read up on the actual process that they have to use to do that, I mean, you're heating this radioactive waste up to 3,800 degrees Fahrenheit, I think.
Fair enough.
And so that's a significant amount of power needed to do that,
Right.
And so it's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, if you use the equivalent of, if you use the energy input equivalent of 100 lithium iron phosphate batteries to create a battery that's got a 50th of the output, but just over a longer period of time, is that really a good solution? So I like the solutions that can be tailored to different use cases, right? So your AA, AAA batteries, the reason why those work so well is because you can have all these different things that you can put them in, and you can discharge them quickly and you can discharge them slowly, and they've got certain ones that you can recharge. You've got your really, really cheap alkaline ones that, you can throw them in a flashlight, and, a year later, your flashlight is roasted because all of the hydrogen, came out of potassium or whatever it is in there. And so, that's a use case that's cheap to produce, and you can use it in a lot of different ways, versus some of the ones that come out like that it's like, okay, well, theoretically it works, but it's such a narrow use case that I just don't ever see it really being commercially viable. I think those are actually theoretically invented in 2016.
Right.
So the idea has been around for a while, and you haven't really heard any like changes or new ideas about it. So that tells you right there that no one thinks that they're going to go very far with it.
Do you ever see, do you know the Heart brand tools that Walmart sells, the blue and white stuff?
Yep.
So when they first released those, well, they've been around a while, but they kind of re-released them a couple of years ago. And I forget who they poached. It might have been the guy from Skill. Anyway, they got a higher up guy from one of the other companies. And their vision for it, they haven't really done it yet, is to introduce that style battery all across the home. So you would now have a single battery that would power your vacuum cleaner, your blender, possibly your microwave, all the small appliances, so that they don't have to have a power source in them, and you can just swap out the battery as needed. Do you think that's practical at all, or you think we might go that way at some point?
Yeah, no, I could definitely see that. I could see that kind of modularity working. Now, it's I tell people all the time, our modern grid really is a miracle. And the idea that at any time, so I've got 2 lights on behind me, right? I'm in a hotel room down here in Gainesville, Florida. I've got 2 lights on behind me, and I can go over there and flip it off and back on and back off and back on, and just keep doing that over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And a million other people can do the exact same thing. And every time I flip it on, the light comes on. And every time I flip it off, it turns off. And there's no sparks and there's no magic smoke coming out. That is a miracle. When you think about those changes in load demand, and how every time you do anything at your house and every time everyone in your town does something in your house, that just works, right?
Right.
And so that being said, distribution and transmission of power is an efficiency loss, and it's expensive to maintain. And we've not done, at least in this country, I don't know about Canada, but in the US, we've not done a very good job of maintaining that infrastructure, much less upgrading it so that we can run terawatts of electric vehicles and the demand that that's going to have. And so the idea that you could go to a place where, kind of like we were talking about with the batteries, we're just saying the same thing. Now we're using a much smaller battery, where now I can store power and use it when I want to.
Right. I never thought of the storing. Yeah.
And so, I talked to some people that are out in California, and, these guys are dealing with peak demand rates of 50 cents per kilowatt hour. Okay.
Yes, sir.
And that's 5 times what we pay in most of the rest of the U.S. Like the average rate, I think, in the U.S. is about 12. Most of the U.S. is in the 10 cent per kilowatt hour range. And so they're paying 50 cents, but only during that time of the day. So imagine that time of the day is when they get up to make breakfast.
Right.
So now imagine that they've got a smart plug with a surge protector plugged into it and 5 battery packs that are getting charged from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. when electricity is next to nothing. Right. And then when they get up in the morning, when it's 50 cents a kilowatt hour, they just take their battery pack and plug it in their microwave and their toaster, and they make breakfast, right? Plug it into their coffee grinder and grind their coffee and make their hollow roast that morning. And so now they're doing all the things they would have done anyways. They're just load shifting. And when you live off grid, you're always load shifting. You're always checking, okay, what's my battery at? Okay, is the sun coming out tomorrow? I'm not going to start washing dishes until 10 a.m., right? You're doing that all the time. And so as the grid, one of 2 things is going to happen. The grid's going to become a lot less reliable, or it's become a lot more expensive to take power off of it because of all the investment that's going to have to be done. Okay.
Yep.
And so if I can utilize strategies like Walmart's Heart brand battery, and I charge my stuff overnight when electricity is cheap, or charge it in the middle of the day when all the solar panels everywhere are generating electricity, and then I use it when I get home to make dinner, well, now I'm saving money, and I'm not participating in that kind of forced we decided what we're going to do to make your electricity more expensive, and now you have to live with it.
And so you're doing what time shifting or time of day, whatever you want to call it. So you could theoretically use solar panels and eliminate that cost altogether, as opposed to just eliminating 80% of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, you could put in a small purpose-built system like you are with your DeWalt tools, and just extract yourself from that situation altogether.
Or, just thinking out loud at this point, you could really do a kind of field expedient version right now. They have those little DeWalt power stations that will kick out 1,500 to 3,000 watts, and you just hook all your DeWalt batteries into them. So you could, of course, because I'm DeWalt, but whatever, Milwaukee has a beautiful one too. Or for that matter, you could use like a Jackery or an EcoFlow, any of those. But I'm just thinking, you've already got all these DeWalt batteries. You could definitely plug them into a little power base and run all of your, your time of day stuff off it.
Absolutely. Huh.
So what about you? Well, actually, you've got a project coming up, and I want to hear about it. But you get a lot of questions about how the hell can I pump water with solar, right?
Right.
So how did I would say this whole thing come about?
Particularly in the last, call it 6 months, and I'm not sure why. It could have been one of those things where I got asked a question and I answered it, and that bred more questions about it. But I get asked the question a lot, how can I move water from one place on my property to another with just a solar panel? I don't want to have to put in a full-blown solar system with charge controllers and inverters and batteries and everything else like that, just to move water from, a spring that I've got low on my property to the hill above the property, and then I can gravity feed that down to the rest of the property. During the day, I can just very slowly pump water up there. And so after getting all of those questions, what I decided to do is actually launch a Kickstarter where I'm going to pair a lot of the solar panels that I have, new and used, with what's called a linear current booster. And a linear current booster is basically just like it's a controller that doesn't allow the pump to come on until there's enough juice coming in from the solar panel to not damage the pump.
Okay.
With a lot of different DC pumps. And so the idea is we're going to train people how to design a system from scratch, how to take into account all of the different math that goes along with, okay, I'm pumping water up this high through this kind of pipe, across this long of a distance, and I want to have X amount of pressure or X amount of flow on the other end, taking all those components together. So we're teaching people how to do that, as well as filming all of the tests, building the test stand. I'm going to produce a white paper that will have all of the test results, as well as the ability to adjust those for different latitudes. So the test that I'm going to be doing is going to be at 35 degrees latitude, 35 degrees north. And so if you're at 40 or 45 or 30 or elsewhere, you can actually take these test results and say, okay, where I live, this is what that pump would be able to do. Maybe I need to step up to the next one, or wow, I'm going to have more water than I know what to do with this system. So we're going to film all of that. We're going to produce all of this content to try to help people do this. And if this is something you're looking at doing, and you've looked at some of the commercially available systems that you just buy, have shipped to yourself, and start using, you're talking about thousands of dollars. So there's ones that are tens of thousands of dollars. I won't name any brands, but there's a system on the market right now that someone just recently asked me about that's $6,000 that he can build his own system if he goes out and sources the individual components that will outperform the $6,000 system for $1,500. So we're running that through Kickstarter. I'm trying to get the funds I'm trying to raise are to buy some pumps that I don't currently have, and the cost to produce and distribute the actual movie when everything's done. That's going to come out. So the Kickstarter launches tomorrow.
Nice.
And we're going to deliver all that in August. So we're going to spend July and the first week of August doing all the testing. There's going to be hundreds of different test cases that we're going to be doing. And then we're going to take a couple of weeks to cut everything together, edit it, and produce all of the all of the test results and everything into the one document. And then we plan on delivering that about the third week of August.
How many different pumps do you plan on testing?
We're going to test 8 different pumps.
Okay.
We're going to test 2 different linear current boosters.
Okay.
And we're going to test, right now, we're looking at 4 different solar panels. We're going to do 1 bifacial solar panel to see if we can get any sort of gain on the backside on that.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and then we're also going to do several used panels. I've got like a 14-year-old 300-watt REC panel in my shed that I'm going to bust out and test. I'm going to test 1 made in America solar panel. So we've got some cool stuff, and we're going to test different elevations as well as different lengths. So the I guess I'd call it the killer test that we're going to do. We're going to simulate 500 feet of vertical head and 1,000 horizontal feet of pump. And we're going to see what we get at the other end.
So, okay, I didn't even know bifacial solar panels were a thing.
Yeah.
Could you, maybe you already think of this, could you take plywood, paint it white behind it so that you get more reflection? Is that going to increase your...
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier about, building something that looks like a carport, but it's really a solar mount.
Yep.
And I've actually talked to people about putting white sand underneath that and parking on the sand and getting, when they're not parked there, obviously during the day, they're getting that reflection back up to the bottom of the panels.
How much more do they cost?
They don't cost anything more.
Really?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the panels that we put in at Nicole's workshop were bifacial panels, and we went with those not because her use case was called for that, but because they were the cheapest per watt panels that we could get our hands on at the time.
So they're probably just not putting the back coating on them then.
Yeah, exactly. What's happening is instead of the back sheet being vinyl, the back sheet is
clear glass. I never thought of that. So because it really doesn't matter that the solar can come from either way. It's interacting with that. Is it the wire or whatever that's in there, or the...
Yeah. So I explain it this way. So basically what you do is you put components together that have a slight electric potential. So they're kind of excited. And then when the photon actually hits the cell, those excited electrons get excited enough to actually leave the cell and go through the bus bars into the J box where they're collected and then routed to your charge controller or your solar pump.
And what got me rather excited when we were talking with this earlier is nobody else has done this or is doing this, right? Like, this is the reason you're doing it behind a paywall. Number one is to turn it into a business case, which I think is great. But number two is because it's not being done anywhere.
Yeah. So like I said, I get asked this question a lot, and there's no place I can go get the actual data to answer these questions. I'm using manufacturing, the manufacturer's pump graph to answer a lot of these questions. And it's like, well, I hope you're pumping in a lab under perfect conditions. Right. And so, yeah, that's the whole reason for doing it is there's enough of these systems going in, and there's enough people that have livestock in remote fields that they're trying to get water to, enough people saying, if the grid goes down, my 200-foot deep well is useless to me because the only option that I have to get water out of it is, the distribution panel in the house. There's enough people even saying, hey, I've got water low on my property and I'd like to move it cheaply to high on my property so that I can then gravity feed it whenever I want to anywhere else on my property. And so being able to actually have the data to design that system and know that it's going to work without spending thousands of dollars and just hoping, I think is going to be a big benefit.
I can see this turning into, I don't know how to, almost like an independent third party solar verification company. Do you know what I mean? Where you run all of these independent testing for the benefit of the consumer so that, because it's great. I know it's the same thing when a company sends me a product and they're like, hey, will you review this? Some products are a lot harder to review than others because some products only work when you kill them. Right. And so you're beholden to lab reports and third-party testing. Right. But if you've got somebody like you, it kind of reminds me, do you know Project Farm on YouTube?
I do not.
Okay. He's a couple million subscribers. It's incredible. He goes out every
farm. I'll have to look that up.
Oh yeah. So he goes out and he buys like, well, this week he did ATF, or automatic transmission fluid, but other times he did like those really cheap 110 volt welders. He bought like 8 different ones, and he does real world testing on them that's repeatable, and he films it all. And yeah, it's that kind of style.
Right.
But what I see you doing is a huge benefit to the homesteading, prepping, off grid, just whatever adjective you want to, pick. But I think there's potential for that to be, well, I don't think there's potential. I think it very easily will turn into your niche in the homestead and prepping market, man.
I'd be happy with that.
Me too. Friggin' right. I would.
The whole idea of taking this to a full-time job is because I really do enjoy helping people. And what's really cool is when you go out after they've put one of those systems in, or you go out and help them put them in, and like you met Carrie Brown, I think at Nicole, and so, they live off grid full time, have for 2 years now. And so, it's always cool. I always say, hey, is everything still working? So, someone you personally know, or even you don't personally know, that's reached out and said, hey, we need help with this, and we don't really know what we're doing. Or here's this $50,000 quote that we got from this solar company, and we don't know if this is a good deal or a really bad deal. Can you help us out? And I'm working with a guy on one of those right now. And fortunately, he called me because unfortunately he was about to get taken advantage of. Really?
I can see it. So one thing we never mentioned as we were talking tonight is you've taken the leap, haven't you?
Yeah. Yes, I have. So like I said, I've worked in the industry that I'm in for 23 years now, and next Friday will be my last day, which means the following Monday will be the first day that Hack My Homestead is my full-time job. So really looking forward to that.
That is the literal definition of burning the ships and burning the bridges, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I cannot wait. I'm stoked. I know you're going to be successful. I can't wait. I
appreciate that.
So number one, how do we find your Kickstarter, and how do people give you money when, or how do they support you with the Kickstarter? And also, how can they hire you? How can they find you? What's your brand?
So I'll start with the first question. You can go to Kickstarter.com, look up solar water pumping. I've been checking that. I'm the only option that pops up the last I checked. I'll actually send you a link, Tim, if you want, added to the show notes.
Okay.
And that way, if people are listening to this through the podcast, they can just go through that and access the Kickstarter. Outside of the Kickstarter, you can email me at Shawn, SHAWN, at hackmyhomestead.com. That is the website, hackmyhomestead.com. There's also a contact form on the website if you just want to go there. There's a place where you can sign up. I do a monthly newsletter where I kind of talk about what's going on in the industry, price points. Every month I design a new system and list every single component and its current price, as well as what the cost per watt would be if you installed that system. And I'm on the other stuff. I'm on Telegram all the time. I'm actually sitting here in the workshop channel. And so I'm not in the group yet, but I've applied now. And,
oh my goodness. Well, we'll add you right now.
I'll tell you what, something that could really help me if your listeners would be interested in doing it is go look up Hack My Homestead on YouTube and subscribe to the channel. I have to have 50 subscribers in order to do anything live stream. And I have been kind of documenting the steps I'm going through on our new system that's going in at the off-grid homestead. And so, that would be great. Email me if you guys have any questions. I do full-blown consultations where I take either your power bill or your list of appliances. I put together a usage chart that lists all 8,760 hours in the year and what your expected usage would be, and then compare that to a generation chart for a certain size solar system. And so I can do the full-blown thing where I give you all the components, show you where to go get them, help you source them from the most cost-effective places, and then give you technical support while you're DIYing your install. And then I also do hourly consultations. So I've got people that have already bought everything and they just want to make sure they've got everything they need. And, so I guess I think those are all the places people can get a hold of me.
I found your Kickstarter link. I threw that in the live chat here tonight. I also found your Hack My Homestead YouTube channel, and I pinned it over in the Telegram group. So now we have no excuse to get him over the hump. I am now subscriber number 39. So everyone else needs to get in there and get him over 50 at least. So that's our goal for this evening, is to at least give Shawn a hug from the workshop and get you over 50. So
yeah, great.
And tomorrow, any certain time the Kickstarter?
I think it goes live at like 12:01.
I never even asked. Do you know? Do you know what your levels of support are?
Yeah. So $1 is the opening level, and that's kind of like, you don't actually get the movie at one level, but there's a couple freebies that I'll send you at $1, and every dollar will help. So for the first 7 days of the Kickstarter, you'll be able to get access to the either HD streaming or HD download. So I know some people like me that are off grid, they would rather download it slowly and watch it in full HD instead of trying to stream it. And so we have both of those options. I think $15 is the HD streaming for the first week. Okay. It goes up after that. And I probably should have written this down before I came on, so my apologies, but I believe it's $25 for the download for the first week. And then it will go up after the first week. And I've got some other levels there. I've got some levels where I'll actually send you some Hack My Homestead swag. And then I've got a couple places where if you've got a business and you want to be listed in the credits or just want to support at a higher level and be listed in the credits, I've got a couple of those levels as well. Oh, Tim, which one of the are you ready to share what the patch of the month is going to be? You said that one of them was based on something I came up with.
I can't, but it's the one you gave me.
Is it the one I had a shirt on that kind of?
No, it's the. I'll tell you offline.
That's all right. Okay.
Yeah. Because it's become a game where everybody holds out to post it in the Telegram group so that nobody gets the surprise spoiled when it comes in the mail.
Okay, I got you.
Yours will actually be. Yours have just been stitched and they're being shipped from. Where is it? I don't know. Over in India somewhere when they do them for me, and then they send me 100 at a time. So
nice.
You'll be getting a few of them in the mail once it comes. So
very cool.
I'm excited. So cool. Yeah. So make sure we've got you at. Let me see here. We got you up to 45 subscribers so far. So we've gained 7 already, guys.
Yeah.
We need to get you up. We need 5 more. Let's see. Can we do this before we hang up here right quick? Oh, Brian Alexovich just subscribed over on Telegram. We're going to see if we can. I don't know if we can, but we'll see what we can do. So, all right, we're at 45. So I just pinned you over in the Telegram group. So I bet you'll be up to 50 before you go to bed tonight. So at least then you'll be able to, do your thing. And I will share around your Kickstarter link tomorrow, and we will get it across the community, because I just spent an hour with Evan Dixon from Radio Maine Easy and an hour and Chuck Peoples from Homestead Medical. And that's exactly what we talked about, creating this circular economy with a whole bunch of freedom-minded, anarchist-loving fools that we want to support each other because everybody has value, and it's okay to ask, it's okay to share, and because everybody's an expert on something and we're worth it, right? So who doesn't need help with solar in our community?
Right.
Thank you, brother. If you want to hang around for a second, I'll close up and I'll be right back with you.
All right, for sure.
Thank you. You're welcome back anytime, and I mean it. So,
all right. Thanks, Tim. And thanks everyone that's subscribing.
We'll talk about attack rabbits next time.
Right.
Yeah. Guys, I'm telling you, we'll get him over there. We will absolutely get him to 50 subscribers tonight. And just support Shawn. The stuff that he does is unreal. He's a friend of mine. We have sat down, we have drank together. Autumn Dawn just made 46. Thank you very much. We've smoked cigars together, and we're going to do more bourbon drinking together. You guys will hear about that after the fact, but he's a friend. He's a person that I can talk to and I can text and ask questions to. He's just a stand-up kind of dude, despite what Dawn, his wife, says about him. So make sure that you take the time. Remember this tomorrow, because that $15 is absolutely nothing. I don't even have a need for solar water pumping, and I'm going to go over and subscribe for that, or support him tomorrow, because why not, right? That's what we do in this community. There's times I've bought things from people simply because they're worth it. And Shawn is absolutely worth it. He has given to the greater TSP community and the TSP family tree for the better part of a decade now. And he is working to make his life better by being his own boss. And that's exactly what we strive to do here. So I just looked, we got him at 47, 3 more to go. We will get him there. And guys, you know I appreciate you. We'll have Shawn back. Send me a bunch of questions for solar. We'll get him there. And as always, stay happy, stay healthy, and have a great week.